Okay, it's time to tell my big secret. A few years ago, I decided to fulfill my promise to Anonymous, to come out of the shadows and do what I said I would do. In 2016, after my 2015 campaign to engage Anonymous directly, in 2016, I publicly announced that I was the founder of Anonymous and revealed my identity in 2016. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. I can't reveal everything all at the same time because there's so much that I could say that if I said it all at the same time, you just wouldn't believe me. So I have to reveal it in pieces and then argue and prove those pieces to be true, as difficult as they might be to accept initially. So in 2016, I declared that I was the founder of Anonymous. I provided evidence, provided arguments, and I even made a video about the history and symbolism of Anonymous with unprecedented detail about the origins and symbolism of Anonymous that no one's ever said before. And my claims work against all the popular myths about Anonymous. And yet, my claims and who I am was investigated by many. I was falsely accused and attacked by many at first, but I was investigated and looked into and confirmed to be telling the truth. And my half-hour video, Anonymous Symbolism, became the most mirrored Anonymous video in existence. So my claim of being the founder of Anonymous was verified. And I did things that I promised that I would do. But there's a lot more. The next step was to announce in 2018, this year, recently, that I'm also the man of prophecy. I am the man prophesied around the world, all religions and even non-religious, all around the world, all speaking about the same one man who would come and perform interventions for mankind and save them from complete destruction and steer them in the right direction. So I've announced myself recently as the man of prophecy, not just the founder of Anonymous, but the man of prophecy, and Anonymous itself being described in prophecies. And I'll put the link in the description of this video for example of a building database of prophecies about me. I've even offered a monetary reward for anyone who can provide a superior argument. You don't even have to prove me wrong. You just have to make a better argument than me. At least do that. And I will pay you to do that. No one has taken it up. I've received a bunch of smear and accusations, but no one has dared to challenge my claim. No one's produced a single argument. I've got a YouTube account with a playlist of showing how I've been censored all over the internet by those who cannot produce an argument. They panic, they freak out, and it challenges everything they believe, and they can't produce an argument because they can't defeat my argument. So they just censor me and even attack and smear me. So, my claim of being the founder of Anonymous has been confirmed. I've provided a lot of evidence. I've contradicted all the popular myths about Anonymous with the truth, and it's been accepted. Now I've been doing the same with being the man of prophecy. And I've even offered a monetary reward with no takers. So, I think it's about time that I speak about the most significant part that I could not mention before, because I had to prove my credibility to show that I wasn't completely insane, I wasn't lying, that I had to prove first that I am coherent, I can produce superior arguments, I'm logical, reasonable, so that when I say things that I cannot yet prove, so everything else before this I've been able to prove. But this claim now that I'm going to make, I can't prove to you yet. It will be proven in the future. but it cannot be proven yet. So this claim is supported only by the legitimacy of my previous claims. If I'm the founder of Anonymous and I'm the man of prophecy, then these claims that I'm about to make must be taken seriously. So now I'm ready to explain that claim. So I'll start with my first moments waking up in the womb. I remember everything. I remember being born, I remember waking up in the womb, growing in the womb. My first experiences in the womb were of 3 bolts of lightning. It felt like bolts of lightning, being electrocuted, being struck by lightning. And it was very painful. And then after that, I slowly woke up with the sound of the heartbeat. And it's all in my life story. It's all explained there. So basically, I remember everything. When I was a toddler, since even as long as I can remember, I knew I was different. I came into this world with knowledge and understanding. I didn't understand where I got it from. It just was always there. And it intimidated adults that I knew these things. But as a toddler, I knew that there was, up in the sky, far away, there were other people, and that they sent me here for a purpose. I didn't know at the time what that purpose was, but I was here for a reason, and I had the strong desire to somehow try and let them know that I had arrived and that I was aware of the fact of the mission. I didn't understand at first the whole thing. My brain was still a toddler's brain. It still hadn't fully formed yet, so that knowledge hadn't taken root yet. But I knew things from the start. Now, I should also add, I don't know if this has always been the case since I was a baby or this happened later on, but about a decade ago, I was attacked and I received serious head injuries, and my head was scanned just to make sure that there was no brain injuries, and a scan of my brain was done, and what they found was 3 solid objects in my brain of in perfectly symmetrical positions in a triangle. There was two objects on either side of my brain, perfectly symmetrical, perfectly shaped, pointing toward the front central object. They're all pointing at each other. These 3 solid objects in my brain. I don't know if that's something that's happened later or I was always born that way. I don't know. Probably was born that way, and it probably had something to do with the knowledge and information that I always had. But anyway, as a toddler, as my brain was forming, still forming, I had this knowledge and these concepts of the people out above and far away, and that I need to contact them somehow. Eventually, I had a dream at night, and this dream was this scenario of me being in this golden coloured hangar with spaceships, circular shaped spaceships in the hangar, and I was talking to other people who were not like human people. They are very different. When I woke up, memories started coming back about that event. Things that were said, different people I spoke to. That was my first memory that came back, proper clear memory that came back. I didn't understand how this would be a memory. It didn't make sense to me because how could I be an adult in the past? it didn't make sense to me at the time. I was only a toddler. As soon as that happened, I had an experience where it seems like it was artificially inserted into me, because I met this group of extraterrestrials who approached me and contacted me, and it wasn't, I didn't actually meet them. It was it was like software that was put into my head forcefully. It was robotic. So basically what happened was, I had this experience where I was confronted by these extraterrestrials. They took me to a virtual place where they spoke to me and tried to explain some things to me. They explained to me that they were on this world a long, long time ago. They lived on this world a long, long time ago, and they looked like they're crossed between an amphibian and a reptile. And I've looked this up just last year, I think it was, and the evolution of amphibians, if I can remember, happened just before reptiles. So this is like, there's a timeline in specific millions of years. I think I'm just guessing here, I think it's like something like 80 million years ago. But anyway, there's a specific timeline in documented evolution that shows what these people looked like, represents that they evolved at that time, at a specific time in documented evolutionary history. So that would have been in, I think, the early dinosaur times, before the mass extinctions. But what happened was that these people explained to me that they've been vastly misunderstood by everyone. They lived on this world. This is their home world before us. They lived on this world, and they were very warlike at the time. They fought against each other, and they were constantly at war. They were so focused on themselves and their wars that they didn't pay attention to what was going on in the solar system and the sun. Something to do with the sun, and I think a meteorite as well. But this both together, both the sun and the meteorite. The sun was becoming unstable at the time, and it caused them problems that decimated their civilizations. And then they were so focused on their wars and everything that a meteor hit, and they didn't stop it because they were too focused on warring with each other. It decimated them, but it didn't kill them all. They left it. They had the technology to travel through space. Not the most advanced technology, but enough to travel. And they mined the solar system for resources. I think, if I remember correctly, they mined the solar system for resources to build the travel a lot further away. So they lived in the solar system at first, and after the Earth was decimated, and then they travelled far away to find a home. And they lived on that home for millions and millions of years, and they forgot all about the fact that they came from here. They forgot their origin, and they only became aware of the fact that they came from here, and that life has resprouted here. As far as they were concerned, Earth was destroyed and it would never recover again. It was just completely sterilized. But life did survive, some life, and it continued to evolve again into what it is now. So they came to me to explain that they have a right to this planet, even though they're not necessarily claiming this planet. They wanted to explain to me that they do have at least some role and right to this planet, and that they have returned, and that they've been vastly misunderstood, that they have a reputation for being violent and savage barbaric, but they explained to me that they are highly ritualistic and they communicate through body movements, a lot through body movements, not just through body movements, of course, but a lot through body movements. The way they communicate in their whole culture seems aggressive to others, their intent is not malign. It's just how they are. They evolved specific emotional, they evolved from around specific emotions. And they're very different to us, and they're very different to everyone else. Which basically, you could say that they evolved from the early reptilian brain, since they're between amphibian and reptile. So they're very different. So they wanted to explain, they just wanted to explain to me that they've been misunderstood. They're not here to take the planet away from us, but they do have a claim on. They do have a say, and they do have a claim that they want acknowledged by everyone. And the main idea they wanted to explain to me is they're not evil. They're not. They've got no violent intentions toward mankind, and they just want the truth. They just want to be understood. And they wanted me, especially me, to understand because of what would happen in the future and who I was, which I didn't understand at the time because I didn't understand who I was at the time. But they put this information in me to let me know they want me to let me know their position, what they wanted to say to me, and then it ended. From there, over the next few years of my early childhood, more memories of that started from that hangar that I was in came back. More dialogue I remembered, and then I remembered a lot more of what happened before and after that, until a greater picture took shape. And a picture goes like this. I was once a man, who according to anthropology and my memories, it seems to match around 13,000 years ago. I could be wrong, but I'm guessing that's around 13,000 years ago, since before the first civilization reached mankind. I was a teacher. I was trying to teach moral and intellectual principles to mankind, and I was widely admired, and I had a big audience of a lot of people who would come and listen to me and admired me, and this, much to my frustration, no matter how much I tried to teach them, they never got what I said. It was like a thrill and a game to them. They were entertained by me, but they weren't taking seriously what I was saying, what I was trying to teach them, the moral principles I was trying to teach them. I was trying to get them to build a better heritage, to build a heritage toward what you would consider advanced culture and civilization, something better than what they were accustomed to. And I wasn't making any progress. None of it was sinking in, even though I had a big fan base. So that went on for a while, for my whole life. And then at one point, this group of extraterrestrial aliens came down. They were very large, probably 2 or 3 times the size of a human. They were different shape than a human, a lot different shape than a human. They were more hunchbacked, basically. They were very pale. They looked only a tiny little bit like what you would consider a grey alien. They weren't grey aliens, not far from it, but they had a face and body colour and tone similar to them. You could call them cross between a grey alien and a cave troll. Imagine a hunched over, more muscular grey alien, giant like a cave troll. That's basically what they were like, and they were pure white with that really in a real pale, almost greyish color. So they came down, and they just did what they wanted. They exploited mankind in order to make mankind not fight back and mistakenly believe that they were benign when they were in fact malign. They gave mankind some technological trinkets, some ideological concepts, and they just gave mankind some things to advance themselves, to become more civilized and all that. And mankind basically accepted their presence in mankind's own territory because they were getting something out of it. From these ideas, that these toxic ideological ideas that became what the world's ideologies today, so the origin of all these ideologies today comes from what these extraterrestrials taught to mankind at the time, which I was there to experience the whole thing. They took these ideas, toxic ideological viruses, and they started the early formations of ideologies based on them. What this led to was a whole lot of corrupt things, like the rampant indulgence of perverted sexual behavior. Some of my people who were the white race met black people and decided to interbreed with different races and bestiality with other species. They had no respect for heritage and the natural order of things. They abandoned the concept of family. They didn't take care of their own children. They only cared about living in the moment, and they have a fetish for pleasure. It's simple, primitive emotional pleasures. And this went against everything that I was trying to teach them. And I tried to teach them that what they were doing was destructive and it was going down the opposite path that I was trying to teach them of morality and all that. And none of it was sinking in. I was all on my own. No one had the understanding of the concept of morality at all. They've all abandoned everything. Everything they are, all abandoned. And I took out my anger, and not just on mankind that was doing it, but against the aliens that were responsible for causing it all. I confronted them about it, and I was the only one who was brave enough to stand up to them because they were so big, and one of them could crush a whole group of humans without any trouble. You don't want to make them angry, and they always seemed angry, so there was always storming off in one direction or another. So no one dared to even get in their way. What these aliens did, what they started doing, after I challenged them, or they're doing this before them, but mankind itself became more aware of what was going on and concerned about it, after I challenged them, was that they were taking women and they'd explained that they were taking them as partners, or what you could consider wives, and they were going to give them a better life, and those women were going to have their children, some kind of interspecies breeding, hybridism or something going on there. No one ever saw any of their children. No one ever saw the women that were taken again. And at first they only took a woman every now and then, and they would just come in, no warning, and take a woman. At first, mankind considered it a trade-off for what they were being given, all the trinkets and everything they were being given. They considered it worth it, but they were taking more and more women as time went on, and mankind was too scared to stand up to them, and they didn't know what to do about it. And I was beginning to be taken more seriously again. because of my warnings. So about these extraterrestrials, they lived in their own enclosures, and they breathed their own air, and they had their own environment. They could exist in our environment, but they always had a struggling look on their face when they were in our environment. They were always hot-footing it from one place to another. They were hunched over in our gravity. Obviously, our gravity was too heavy for them, being as huge as they were. Especially, our gravity would be a big burden on them. But they struggled to breathe in our environment as well. At one point in me constantly trying to having the courage to stand up to them and challenge them, none of them took me seriously. They were a bit taken back at first. They were a bit shocked that this puny little human would try and stand up to them. But they didn't feel threatened by me at all. They started to ignore me. But then one of them I challenged them to debates, and they wouldn't accept my challenge. But one of them eventually did. We spent all day debating. Now, these aliens struggled in our air. From what I remember, this alien he brought a breathing device with him that he switched on every now and then to be able to breathe properly, but they could spend time in our environment, just not too long. But he had a breathing device with him to manage in our environment. We're outdoors having a debate for hours and hours. Eventually, he got too sick and had to go, but that wasn't the reason why he left. I'll explain that. We debated for hours. I basically ended up catching him out in his circle of lies. Basically, they had no concept of morality at all. It was completely foreign and incomprehensible to them. There was a massive hole in their system of logic was very advanced, but they had massive holes in them that they weren't even aware of. So after hours and hours, I caught him out in his own holes of logic, and he was basically forced to face the holes in his own logic and the validity of morality, this concept that they didn't have even a grasp on. He eventually got angry and stormed off. He almost attacked and killed me, but he didn't. He ended up storming off. After that, I'll just check my phone, see if it's still recording. Yeah. After that, several of them, not one of them, but several of them came to kill me. I don't know why several of them. Obviously, I'd upset them, because one of them could just easily come and just kill me, squish me, like that. No problem. Because they were so huge and so much more stronger than a human. There's nothing I could do. I wouldn't be able to escape them. They could run faster than me, just grab me. But several of them came to kill me. And I'd obviously scared them, intimidated them, offended them. They came to kill me, and I didn't flinch at all. I stood up to them. I exposed them in front of mankind, in front of people. I exposed their true colors, hoping that people would see their true colors and see what was really going on, how they were exploiting mankind, and mankind needed to stand up to them. They were a bit taken, how do I explain it? They backed off at first because they were confused and amazed at how I would have this courage and resolve and integrity and this strength that I had. They didn't understand where it was coming from. It confused them. But then they went to go. They only backed off for a brief moment, and then they came to try and kill me. As they came to try and kill me, a spacecraft appeared above and fired beams of light. I think it was beams of light or something at them, and they ran off. Didn't hurt them. Just sent warning shots at them, and then they ran off. This craft came down, and someone came out of it. A different alien came out of it, and explained to me that they have been watching the whole thing. That they've been watching for a while. They became aware that these extraterrestrial aliens were interfering with mankind and doing what they were doing, and they decided to stay and watch for a while just to see see and document what was going on, and then report it back to their superior authorities, which are really far away. So they came to watch for a while and document what was going on and report on it. They were watching the whole progression of everything that went on. They saw the whole debate I had. They saw me standing up to them all the time and what I was teaching mankind. They saw it all, and they were there to witness the whole event where they came to kill me, and decided that they would intervene. They decided that I was different, special, something worth intervening over. I didn't realise until later how special they considered me to be, but what they did was at first they wanted to use me as a middleman. They trusted me, the integrity and morality I had. They trusted me and considered me truly enlightened and trustworthy for a mission. They wanted me to be an intermediary, one to intercede between, not just for mankind, but between this interfering group of aliens and the governing authorities far away. They wanted to use me as a messenger. So they took me on their craft to their authorities far away. And I was eventually given a ship of my own. It was, how do you explain it? It wasn't as circular as kind of ship that you'd see as a normal UFO. It was different. It was shaped like a bird without its wings extended. It didn't have extended wings. It was shaped somewhat like a closed bird. It was small too. It wasn't big. It was small, only enough to fit me. So they gave me a ship and set me the task of being a messenger back and forth between those aliens and them. Now, the thing about being a messenger and traveling so far is that it takes a lot of time. So, for me, leaving Earth, going to far away to these authorities, everyone that just by getting there, everyone I'd ever known would have been long dead. A lot of time has gone by. So for me to be a messenger going back and forth, I'd be existing in a whole timeline of my own, basically. I'm skipping into the future, constantly skipping into the future as a messenger. But I became a messenger, and I sent messages and warnings back and forth, trying to stop this group from doing what they were doing, and passing on warnings that if they didn't stop it, that they would come and intervene personally and remove them by force and hold them accountable, which they ignored all along. They didn't do anything about it. So basically, for a long time, I was an what would you call it, a messenger. And I got, as being a messenger, going through a long period of time now, it wasn't just the distance, the time it took to go from A to B. The traveling itself made time go by at a different speed, a far different speed. So it wasn't just the time it took to go from A to B. The flow of time itself would be change, a lot more time would go by than the actual distance itself. Somehow, with the way the travel, how intergalactic travel works. So the time that went by would be extended beyond the travel distance. And I'll basically be in a kind of comatose stasis while I would travel, which took its toll on my body. It wasn't very good for the human body, and it made me sick, progressively sick as time went on. And I'll get to the point where I was about to die from it. But I was a messenger going back and forth between the two groups, and each time I came back to Earth, I tried to teach mankind and put them on the right path. And some of what I taught would be continued on in the early human civilizations, and I would come back and find that they'd based religions and ideologies off things that I've said, and they've kept some of the quotes that I've said as what we call it, memes. But they consistently got most of it wrong and corrupted most of what I said, and I would have to try and correct them every time. So basically, I kept coming back to Earth at different periods of time throughout the progression of human civilization. I was there just before human civilization came, and I was there progressively, incrementally along the way, influencing and interacting with mankind along the way, while being a messenger between the two groups. So I steered the path of mankind throughout time, throughout civilizations. Eventually, they decided my task as a messenger was done, and they wanted me to do something even more important. They decided that I was one of what it was apparently only 6 of us in the entire galaxy that were basically considered by them as being almost like deities. They considered that they didn't believe in a god. They remained neutral. It was basically considered, if you were too believing in a god or too unbelieving in a god, it was both ways. It was considered inappropriate and was looked down upon. So the general position was to remain neutral as you can on the matter of there being a god or not. But they recognize that there may very well be a god, and they recognize specific individuals as being of such huge anomalies that they considered that the underwriting forces of the universe itself were manifesting through us, and they considered us 6 as being the right hand and expression of what may be God itself. Not that we were God, but that we were, everything that we did was the will of maybe God. So in some way we're considered like deities. And they gave us the power to do absolutely anything we wanted without consequences. We alone overrode all laws. We were not to be held accountable for anything we did. We were basically told, here, we will give you everything we can. Do as you will. Intervene and do what you do. But they also basically gave us missions too. They didn't just give us the freedom to do anything. They gave us missions to do. Things that they wanted us to intervene in and fix. Now, what they did with me is, I expected, okay, I'm going to be doing some important things, and I was very disappointed in what they wanted me to do. What they wanted me to do was deal with a drone problem. Now, there are these aliens that you would call the Greys. Now, from what I was told, there are about half a dozen grey. There's a lot of different species, and there's a lot of that you would loosely consider grey that aren't. But there was this one region of space where half a dozen species evolved independent of each other, they were all very similar, and they were grey-like. And the languages used were different than English, so I can't give you the words, just the descriptions of what the names meant. They were named as a group based on their physical appearance, based on their frail bodies, their frail white skinny bodies. Their name was a description of their bodies. There was a region of space considered their space. And there are other species in that space as well, but it was considered basically what we would call the grey region of space. They had dominance over it all. They had control over it all. A long time ago, they built these drones, these biological automatons. They weren't alive, they were robots. They had biological bodies, but they didn't have a brain. They were grown without a brain, and they were born with a connection where you could put computer hardware, you connect computer hardware to it. So they would exist. They wouldn't die without a brain. They had enough that they would just function automatically, unconsciously, not just as a biological robot. But they had connections where you could connect and program and all that. And basically, they were stupid. They weren't reliable. They would get things wrong and not do what they were told properly. So they had to constantly supervise them what they're doing. Otherwise, they'd get it wrong and do something bizarre. So what they were is they were like they weren't just like the Greys. They were similar to the Greys. Well, the Greys themselves, at least this half a dozen group of Greys, not counting other Greys, which is some of them are tiny, but this region of space, this region of grey space, made up of half a dozen species. These species ranged from between probably 4 or 7 feet tall. But these drones were smaller. They were smaller than any of those Greys. And while the Greys themselves were skinny, the drones were chubby. Chubby in considering to their standards anyway. They were a lot more chubbier. They were like children, basically drone children of them, copies of them. Now, these drones became used a long time ago for sexual purposes, used as sex slaves. And this gave the Greys a bad reputation because they were known for being exploitative, corrupt, and some of them had what was a third sex. 2 sexes was generally the norm. There were some hermaphrodites, but the vast majority of alien species were same male and female sexes. The vast majority of them had 2 arms, 2 legs. There were some differences. Some of them were bizarre differences, but most of them fit the same general mold of having 2 arms, 2 legs, a head with 2 eyes. The same pattern. But some grey species had a third sex which performed no biological function. It didn't pass on any DNA, but it was considered it was an evolved thing. It wasn't like what we call trans and all that bullshit today. That's imaginary, but it was considered an evolution of what we consider that today, the imaginary sex. Sexual perversion itself forming into over a long time into a non-functional sex of its own. So their third sex was considered the result of long-term sexual perversion. So these drones were the servants of the Greys, and in order to avoid a boycott in trade, a universal boycott in trade, and a complete distancing from everyone else, they had to save their reputation by abandoning the drones and not using them anymore. Not only the Greys, but some other species started using them as sex slaves as well, and for other perverted reasons. That's just a train. Hang on. Okay. They abandoned the drones, and they didn't destroy them. They just abandoned them and expected them to just sit there waiting for instructions and eventually just die. Long time passed, and there were rumors of these drones appearing here and there around the galaxy at random places, acting strangely. Wasn't taken seriously at first, but more and more reports happened, and then it was proven that they were doing this, and it just grew and grew and grew and just kept growing until it became a rampant problem where they would appear in worlds and covertly kidnap millions of people and mutilate and kill them and do strange experiments that didn't make any sense, acting in bizarre ways. And no one knew how they were replicating themselves, who was giving them instructions. It was theorized that someone was using them as a tool to covertly war against specific civilizations, but there was no pattern to the civilizations they were attacking. At least at first they weren't. The drones became such a problem that they were the number one threat of the entire galaxy. They just completely overrun the galaxy, and no one knew where they were getting their instructions from. It was outlawed that anyone have any interaction with them whatsoever. No one was allowed to go near them. No one was allowed to speak to them, in case they took anything they say as a command and start acting in bizarre ways and doing what they were doing. So all interaction with the drones was completely outlawed. Everyone was told to avoid them as much as possible and destroy them if they see any of them. But some argued that they had somehow evolved their own some level of consciousness, and that they were acting on their own and just trying to preserve themselves. But there's no coherent basis behind that argument. It was more of an appeal to emotion because they appeared like children, and those who were most empathic would be prey to seeing them as little children and wanting to protect them. But they weren't alive. They were just biological robots. So there was no consensus on what to do about them, but they were the number one threat, and no one, and even destroying them. The more you destroy them, the more they keep coming back as faster and faster, and they've completely overrun the galaxy. So they wanted me to resolve the drone problem, and I destroyed many of them myself. I remember one specific what you'd probably call a space station, where I destroyed millions of them at one time. I didn't want to destroy them at first. I investigated them. I tried to interact with them. I tried everything. I tried to understand what I could about them. Basically, I became of the position that they weren't alive. They were just biological robots that need to be wiped out, and that there was clearly someone behind it. Someone was operating behind the scenes and using them as a proxy to do whatever they were doing, whatever their plan was, to interfere with galactic affairs and cause a destabilization of things and destroy something, whatever they were trying to destroy, which is obviously the political order of things. Now, the political order of things had been going on for over 1 billion years. Now, I don't know if this was over 1 billion years in Earth years or whatever format that they were referring to. I'm assuming that it would be Earth years. But for longer than 1 billion years, there's been a general galactic peace and a system that was put in place a long, long time ago, at a time where there was so much war that it threatened the entire galaxy. And there was a war between two sides, and it was resolved in a truce where a certain system was to be put in place, and that system was to last for a time so that both sides could test what their argument and position was. They could test their argument through the truce, through what would become of life after a certain time had passed. These two sides would be, you could probably consider them the forces of good and evil. The two sides that were responsible for all this warring disappeared 1 billion years ago. They made the truce and they disappeared, never to be seen again. Now, there were reports of strange battles between unknown spacecraft, wars going on in space that have been seen by many, that using technology never seen before, and no debris would be found of the result of these battles. No debris was ever found, but it was documented. It was proven to have happened, and with no physical evidence of, and no physical manifestation of it. It was strange, no one could understand. But there was clearly two sides fighting in what appeared to be a non-physical way. And these sides were considered to be the sides behind the truce a long time ago. And something was obviously going on, and no one knew what was really going on. And the political entity, I don't know what to even call it, the governing authority, they explained that they weren't allowed to talk about it. They had a specific task to do, and they weren't allowed to do anything beyond that. Now, the governing authority had the politicians, you would call them. There's nothing like politicians and government that we see today. It was very different. They had this technology where they were able to see into the future. Not with total accuracy, but they had technology on top of what they had to make it more accurate and try and take a distorted image of the future and make it more clearer and into something that they could work with. They were able to see into the future, and they explained that this drone problem would consume the entire galaxy, and that I was the one that had to intervene. This is why they chose me for this mission in the first place, why they trusted me and considered me so important. They saw me in the future. So, there's so much to try and... I'm only giving an abbreviation here. There's so much I could say. But, so I dealt with the drone problem, and there's so much I could say about the whole system of governments and different extraterrestrial species I was aware of. I was just explaining one more thing. At one point, I was there to witness very important communication between two galaxies, between our galaxy and the next galaxy that was nearby. I assume this to be the Andromeda galaxy. It was a smaller galaxy than ours, and long distance of time would go between any kind of communication that would happen between us. I assumed because of the distance or something. But this long-awaited communication, I was there to witness it, and basically our galaxy wanted to interact with and learn about their galaxy and share information about as much as possible, about everything. And this other galaxy, probably Andromeda, was intimidated by our galaxy. They knew that we had been at perpetual war, but they were basing this off a billion years ago, when there was war. There'd been a peace for a billion years, but they were basing their decision on whether to interact with us or not on their knowledge of us warring a long time ago. And they didn't want to communicate with us at all. They didn't want anything to do with us. They didn't want anything to do with us, with our wars. They didn't want our wars causing trouble for them. And they didn't want nothing to do with us. And obviously, that led to a lot of disappointment. But as it became revealed that their galaxy was no better than ours, they were stuck in perpetual war themselves. But they were intimidated by the size of our galaxy and the fact that we had a lot more life in our galaxy than they had in theirs, not just the size, but the amount of life. And they were intimidated and didn't want anything to do with us. So anyway, I'll skip so much things here. I can't explain everything, it's too long. Eventually, I was confronted by... No, but explain a bit... I'll explain something first. I'll explain the start of this. One of the 6 of us that were considered the... I don't know what to explain this. What we were considered as. There's no word to explain what we were. One of us special ones. The 6 of us. She approached me over a conspiracy. She was convinced that the governing authority knew more than they were letting on. She knew more about politics than me. I didn't know that much about how things worked, but she was very well versed in it all. She explained to me that she was convinced that there was a conspiracy going on, that there was things going on that they wouldn't tell us, and that they weren't allowed to tell us, that we had to figure out on our own, and that we had to confront them. They could not talk about it unless we confront them and explain that we were aware of it. It involved the drones, and it involved the wars going on a billion years ago, and it involves the sides behind that war. And it involved the fact that one of us needed to make the ultimate sacrifice in order to save everyone else and save the future of the entire galaxy, and perhaps even beyond that. I didn't take her serious at first. I wanted to see some strong evidence of this. I needed more information on it. But she was convinced, and to prove it, she said that she called for a meeting between us and one of the, what would you call it, a matriarch? A long-lived matriarch, who came out to meet us, and she said to me in advance that this matriarch would act in a certain way, would respond in a specific, peculiar way, because she was only allowed to respond in a certain way. She wasn't allowed to reveal anything about it, but she would not deny the conspiracy. So she questioned the matriarch about her ideas, and the matriarch reacted exactly how she said she would react, and would not deny what she said. So that's when I took her seriously, and I confronted, both of us together, confronted them about it directly, and revealed what we understood to be the problem going on, and that we were aware of the problem. We explained the problem as we understood it, and then that was when the matriarch confessed that, okay, we weren't allowed to talk about it. You had to figure this out for your own. It was basically, we saw things that would happen in the future. We weren't allowed to talk about it as beyond our responsibility. We're only meant to maintain things as long and far as we can. We're not allowed to intervene ourselves. That's what your job is to do. You had to figure this out for yourselves before we could even mention it. And basically they confirmed everything that we said, that we come up with was true. And they expanded on it. They basically said that, how can I explain it? They came to me, they took me to a place, and then they came to me shortly after with prophecies. And these prophecies were from my planet that they had recently become aware of. Now, basically, he told me that things were going on my planet that have become a concern. Now, first, there was the use of nuclear weapons that got their attention, which I attribute to probably World War II. It was not just nuclear weapons, but the fact that mankind was in such intense wars, and that they have become aware of being able to use nuclear weapons. And that presented a potential threat to galactic peace. Now, there was a rule basically that violent species must be eradicated. Those that present a threat must be eradicated. Those are the terms of the truce, the billion-year truce, as part of the terms of that. So, because we weren't a spacefaring species yet, we weren't under that rule yet. But in 1969, mankind went to the moon and became a spacefaring species. And that was what they would not tolerate. That was the line. The fact that mankind had gone to the moon and become spacefaring made mankind a direct threat to them and everyone. So they were going to destroy our planet, as what their rules say. But then they became aware of prophecies. Now, normally they wouldn't take prophecies seriously, but they thorough with everything. They investigated the prophecies, and they came to me with these prophecies, and they were convinced that these are there to be taken seriously because they are referring to me. I looked through the text that they gave me. They gave me a whole bunch. It took me a long time to read through it. They didn't give me everything. They just gave me examples. And what they gave me was of mankind quoting me word for word things that I said that they'd have attributed to people like Jesus, people like gods in other religions, quoting me word for word. However, when it came to this Jesus character, well, some of what he said was exactly what I said. There were things that he said that I didn't say that were very different to me, and I wasn't convinced that I was this Jesus that they were talking to. But they were convinced that I was the man prophesied about. They didn't say I was this Jesus. They said that I was the one that was prophesied about. I didn't read everything. I wasn't aware of all prophecies that I am aware of now, but I was convinced that mankind had developed this history of civilizations and become what it had become as a result of my own teachings mixed in with these ideological viruses that aliens taught them 13,000 years ago. And the constant perpetual warring and destabilization of mankind is a result of both of those forces. Basically, they said that one of us 6 had to go down to Earth in a one-way trip and make the ultimate sacrifice and perform interventions on this planet. Now, the one who came up with this idea in the first place, who came up with this conspiracy in the first place, was she wanted to be the one to do it, but I came from this planet. I am responsible for a lot of what has happened on this planet. It is my responsibility to be the one to intervene. If I didn't intervene, she may have intervened if I didn't intervene, but basically, if I didn't intervene, mankind and the entire planet would have been destroyed. It was my purpose to give mankind one last chance to correct its ways after other attempts have been made in futility in the past, and mankind just continuously reverts back to the same immoral filth and warfare over and over again. It was my purpose to come down and intervene and give them one last chance. And should I fail, I will be utterly destroyed along with the entire world. And it was a one-way trip. I would forget practically everything about who I or what I was. I basically had to be born as a person, as a human in mankind, in a one-way trip. Now, I wasn't aware of the whole details of everything. I'm skipping so much here. There's so much I could say. But basically, I had to die. I went into this chamber where I would be killed and disassembled, and I didn't understand how it worked. But basically, I would die or almost die. It's hard to explain whether you would consider it death or not. But they would somehow take what is me. They would take me and insert me into a baby in a womb. And they ensured me that I would be able to remember enough that I would be able to fulfill my mission. I was given two choices. There was a family in Eastern Australia and there was a family in Japan. They had to narrow down the possible choices of what would fulfill these prophecies, and they narrowed it down to those two. I chose the family in Eastern Australia, and after I chose, they said that, yeah, that was probably the best choice, our preferred choice as well. So I chose to be here. I knew that I would live a life of extreme suffering. I would lose everything and everyone that I had, and I'll go on a one-way trip. Now, this story fulfills many prophecies that I haven't even mentioned yet, especially many prophecies attributed to Jesus about him, about pouring out his life until death and all that. So I came to this world, and then my first moments were of the 3 electrical strikes in the womb, followed by the rest of what I said before and what's in my life story. I've abbreviated so much here. There's so much of the story. I will expand on this in the future. This is just an introduction to the big secret. As hard as it is to believe, it is a memory I've had since I was a young child, very young child, a toddler. A toddler simply does not have memories like this. And I'm only abbreviating here. There's a lot of detail, a lot of detailed technology involved. Things that are coherent, logical, and when I had these memories at the time with no even concept of what an alien was, the very topic has evolved over recent years to match, to not totally accuracy, but the topic of aliens has evolved from the time I was born, which I wasn't even aware of at the time, but the topic itself has changed to match my story. Not totally, but a lot of that has matched my story. There's so much I could say. But basically, I came here as a one-way trip, and if I fail my mission, I go down with the ship. Basically, the only reason why this planet has not been destroyed is because of me. And my interventions in mankind are the only chance mankind has. Now, I founded Anonymous. I founded a whole bunch of stuff a long time ago that has changed the world from behind the scenes. And I have fulfilled many prophecies, not from one religion, but from all around the world. This topic, this situation, is far beyond one man. It is far beyond one chosen race. It is far beyond this planet. This is about solving something that been going on for over 1 billion years that involves our entire galaxy and probably far beyond. Perhaps involving the whole universe. What else can I say? I have had, in my lifetime here, various, what we would call supernatural and other alien extraterrestrial events with witnesses, many times with witnesses. I may explain them at a later time. There's so much I could say. Anyway, I think if I think of anything else, I'll add it to this video, but I'll stop the recording for now. This is just an introduction of what I can't yet prove, but these are memories I've had. I don't even claim that this is all true. I don't know. It doesn't make sense that it's not true. These are memories. These aren't imaginations. These are memories I've had since I was a toddler. Very coherent, clear, logical memories since a toddler that match prophecies. They match entire history of mankind and civilization, match everything. I will add something else. The topic of aliens. Now, it became a craze decades and decades ago, the topic of aliens visiting Earth, and it became popular, and people thinking they're seeing UFOs everywhere. Now, obviously, not everything that's attributed to being a UFO is a UFO, and now that we have Photoshop and all that, there are faked videos and photos, despite the fact that in the past there was no Photoshop and those photos existed of clear UFO craft. The topic of aliens. Only an idiot in today's age, with the knowledge we have now, would think that we're the only life in the universe. Only an idiot would think that now. Extreme ignorance. The question now, in 2018, is whether an alien... It's not whether an alien race exists, it's almost certain. It's whether they have the ability to travel here or not, and whether they have travelled here or not. Now, there is a lot of evidence throughout history of alien extraterrestrial interference. And despite many claims of present day occurrences, there is a lot of evidence today. However, the topic of extraterrestrials, if this was all in everyone's heads, then surely in 2018 there will be more so-called alien abductions and sightings than ever. But that's not what's happened. Around the turn of the millennia, maybe a little bit after the millennia, about the time that I started Anonymous, maybe a little bit after that, almost all alien abduction reports and UFO sightings completely stopped. Just disappeared. If it was all imaginary at a time where the internet is at its height, is growing like crazy, you would expect such so-called conspiracy theories to become rampant like every other conspiracy theory did. Now, the topic itself became very popular and focused, sure, but the reports, the sightings and the reports of alien abductions almost completely disappeared, which doesn't make sense. Because the only way it makes sense is if, at least to a majority of a degree, that this is actually happening, and that there's a reason why this stuff has stopped. Now, I can argue why this stuff has stopped, because according to my memories, the Earth was placed under a quarantine. Now, there was a lot of disagreement with different extraterrestrial groups over what was going on this planet, and a lot more focus and attention brought upon this planet over everything that's going on. I would argue that while the Earth was placed on under a quarantine at different periods throughout long history, and I'm talking a long, long time ago, and where certain aliens were here before we were. That's a topic on itself I haven't even mentioned, about the whole anthropology. That I'll have to skip all that. Anyway, I argue that the Earth was put under another quarantine shortly after the year 2000, and that quarantine was not enforced heavily due to a lack of resources, but it has since been enforced with increasing force, to the point where any aliens that have been on this planet have been told to get the fuck out, or we'll remove you by force. And virtually all interference and involvement with mankind has been completely taken out of the equation, so that I can do my mission and be the one to intervene without any further interference and resolve mankind's problems once and for all. Now, what was I going to mention? There's so much I could mention. Yes. We'll mention one more thing about the extraterrestrial topic and my own experiences. Now, I used to live in Batto Bay, in New South Wales, Australia. Batto Bay in the Wyong Gosford Shires. Now, in Wyong Gosford Shire was in the 1990s one of the world's most active UFO hotspots. You probably look on YouTube for Gosford Files, and you'll see. You should be able to still see a video on YouTube regarding an event where 3,000 people witnessed a spherical shaped UFO come straight down from the clouds, stop above the water, boiled the water for a while, and then took off back up. And 2 police officers even testified to seeing it too. But 3,000 people saw it. That was just one event. There's a whole thing. It went on for a couple of years, and I had personal interactions with. It's a long story, but I won't mention it here. But there's a long story there regarding me and the topic of aliens in the 1990s. Not just the 1990s, but especially in the 1990s. My identity and location was discovered. I was approached, and some things happened that I can't mention yet. I may make another video with a detailed list of everything that's happened. But I lived in one of the world's hottest UFO hotspots. Anyway, there's so much I can say. I've only abbreviated here. This is just an introduction to so much more. I'm not lying. I'm not insane. I've been accused of being insane by a lot of people without any evidence. I've been accused of being insane and a liar by the government. I've been in prison for a year in a psychiatric facility under many accusations by the government, and I've been cleared of every single accusation they've ever made against me and deemed perfectly insane and of unusually high intelligence by my very accusers. Some of the most corrupt people in the world have admitted that their accusations against me were false and that I was telling the truth and I am perfectly sane. But if you're gonna just reject what I say by blindly and hand-wavingly just saying you're a liar or you're insane or whatever other bullshit, then you're not making an argument, you're not being reasonable. No matter how bizarre something may sound or impossible it may sound, take it for what it is and apply reason and arguments and evidence to it. Now, I can't provide any direct evidence to anything I've claimed here. This is why I've left this until last. I can prove that I am the founder of Anonymous. I can prove that I am the man of prophecy. I cannot prove these claims because the earth is under quarantine. But the topic and things that I've said can be backed up by a lot of other people who have said similar things about the alien topic not in recent years. But my story doesn't fit with the general narrative. It's different. Just like my story of Anonymous is different than the general narrative, yet it has been accepted as the truth. I'm telling the truth, and time when my mission is complete and the earth is no longer under quarantine and mankind's wars and ideological virus problems are solved once and for all, and mankind is definitely no longer a threat to everyone else, then and only then will there be any interaction between mankind and extraterrestrials, at least official and open interactions. So if anyone wants to produce an argument to dismiss anything I've said here about aliens, I acknowledge that I don't have any evidence of these claims. I don't even claim that my claims are the truth. They are memories very clear and strong memories I've had, coherent and consistent memories I've had since I was a baby. I've not based my life on these memories. However, I came into this world with a lot of knowledge already that are attributed to these memories. Now, I came into this world to bring Anonymous to this world, a new way of doing things. This doesn't just apply to mankind. Anonymous, I learned the ways of Anonymous through my experiences in the entire history of mankind and the very beginning of civilization in mankind. I've witnessed mankind from before the birth of civilization, throughout civilization. I've come to this world over and over again and influenced mankind and experienced mankind, witnessed mankind and the constant mistakes that keeps repeating itself. I've experienced how things go on in the galaxy, their ideologies and principles they live by. The moral and ideological principles that I had when I started all this 13,000 years ago. That's as far as my memory goes back. Who knows? It might be even before that, more before that. But my memory goes back as far as about 13,000 years ago. The same moral principles and everything that I had then are the same I have now, yet they've only proven themselves. And it is through my interactions with the galaxy at large that have refined and proven the ways of what is known as Anonymous, which can be attributed to the ways of God, if there is a God and it exists. Realize that there's more going on here than a silly internet movement. There's more going on here than defending just one race from genocide, the white race. This is beyond anything in this world. This is as large scale as it gets. This is a part of something going on in a very grand scale of things. The ultimate scale of things. So anyway, I better stop now because there's so much I can say and so many different topics to deal with. I've done a long video explaining a lot more detail about this story, about my history and my memories. That's been up for about a year or two, but it's been private. It's been on another YouTube channel, so it's been hidden. I've showed it to a handful of people, but I've kept it hidden. I might upload that to this channel in the future. I don't know, I'll see what I'll do. But I intend to expand on this whole story in the full extent that I can and explain every supernatural and extraterrestrial interaction I've had throughout my life. These are not bizarre stories. These are coherent stories that fit with prophecies. They fit with everything logical and reasonable. So I'll finish it here, and with not a promise, but an expectation that I will expand on this in the future. This has just been a very brief introduction to something that is huge. A long story with a lot of witnesses too. So anyway, I'll finish it here and more later. That's it.